And I'd never experienced anything like that before. I'd definitely experienced feelings of stress and anxiety, but I'd never had such a physical reaction. So my body essentially at that point made it actually impossible for me to ignore. Slowing down is actually being able to start to hear and name sensations in the body. It gets very somatic in the body. So whether that's a tightness in the chest, a heaviness on the shoulders, a gripping of the jaw, a need to reach for the phone,
If we think about all those things that were layered up in your pressure cooker, the panic attack is the steam that comes out at the top. It's just the body saying, right, enough now.
With what I've brought today, because I think leaders have such an incredible amount of self-awareness, but rarely that is physical. So I would be asking them, what is your body telling you that you currently aren't hearing?
Hello, it's your leadership coach, Estelle Read, and host of Optimising Leader Brilliance, the place for calm, confident, and strategic leadership. Stay tuned to the end for a mini coaching and reflective practice. Find out more about my services by heading over to estelleread.com. So shortly before we went on holiday, we found out some really sad news that a previous podcast guest, Asterios Drossos, who worked for Sani Icos, had sadly and suddenly passed away. We were really, we're still devastated by this news. He was such a great family friend. He was our holiday family friend. That's how I came to know him. And during this episode, you will hear that the guest, Maddie, she will be answering Asterios's question. And so I just wanted to pre-warn you, that was all. But do you know what? Asterios leaves a legacy. He was so beloved and he was totally blown away by the feedback he had on his podcast episode. He shared many of the messages from the listeners, and people had got in touch that had had contact with him for decades, just like us. And yeah, it's clear that not only did he have a massive impact on not only the people he worked with, so his work colleagues, but also the hotel guests that he served. So our heartfelt condolences to Asterios's family, and I dedicate this episode in his memory. He was one of the good ones. So Maddie Brenner-Roach is an embodiment coach and yoga teacher. Now, I didn't know what embodiment coach actually meant until I started talking to her. And she is so interesting, wise, and she runs her own business called Journey on Coaching. Now, she's going to get you to think differently about your mind-body connection and how to interpret those signals that go on in our body that often we ignore or mask. And then she will share with you her inner authority framework, which is absolutely brilliant if you're feeling as though you've abandoned yourself and that maybe you're close to burnout, stress, overwhelm, and it's really going to get you to connect in and think differently about how you make decisions and approach things. So let's welcome Maddie. So welcome everyone. I'm really pleased to introduce Maddie Brenner-Roach, an embodiment coach and yoga teacher. And we met on Instagram, didn't we? And you left me a gorgeous message. And I just love the sound of your voice. I loved your enthusiasm, your positivity, but I was just really intrigued by what you do for a living, because I don't know what an embodiment coach is. But when we had our chat, I thought, oh, this is really interesting. And I think the leaders that listen to this podcast would benefit from your expertise and advice. So welcome. And should we kick off with what is an embodiment coach?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's beautiful to be here. So that is the question I get a lot, which is glorious because then I get to share a lot about what I do. So An embodiment coach is a combination of things. It's an intersection. So I am trained as a transformative life coach. So I hold a lot of space to help. So I serve specifically women. So I help women to unlock from, long held beliefs and move forward in life. But the intersection is where it meets the body. So my belief is that a lot of us spend a lot of our life shoulders up in our heads, cultivating fantastic awareness, but we are less ready, less aware, less willing to take that, what I call shoulders down and into the body. So I see my expertise as helping women embody what they already know. So just as a little example, a very simple example is a lot of people say, I know I need to scroll on my phone less. And like we have this really intellectual, awareness that we should maybe be doing that less. It serves both our physical and mental health. But what is the block? What is the reason that we can't seem to get that into actual action? So that's where I come in. And a lot of my work is deep rooted in the wisdom of the body. So what are the signs that often we can't hear and often we're not attuned to?
Oh, so many questions already. Right. Okay. So, so you are a transformative coach that unlocks beliefs. What's your process for unlocking beliefs?
So one of the biggest, I suppose the first thing we have to do is to slow everything right down, because often we're this very, very traditional picture, isn't there, that you might have seen of like the iceberg, like tip of the iceberg, right? And often we can just be working with that piece of the iceberg we can see above the water. So like the thing that's coming to us in that moment. And my work is to slow down and unpack so we can get under that water and actually see. Often there's this huge, piece of ice that's underneath that's running the show that sometimes we're conscious of and we're sort of choosing to ignore it. But more often than not, a lot of that sits within the subconscious. So the beginning of the work is to slow everything down and to start to hear what's going on and to build that level of safety. Like safety is such a huge part of my work, because if we're not feeling safe within ourselves, if we're not trusting ourselves, we're not going to be able to go into that sort of deeper work and understanding of those beliefs and those patterns. And from there, once we have that awareness, that self-trust, that's when we can start to challenge those beliefs and those patterns.
That is great. And so next question then, how do you slow down and hear what's going on and do that in a safe way?
That's like some of my favorite type of work, to be honest. That's why I'm here. I learned, and I'm sure we'll get onto this, like through a lot of my own experience of reconnecting in with my body, that we can't actually slow down until we start to listen to the body. So often in sessions when I'm working with women, slowing down is actually being able to start to hear and name sensations in the body. So whether that's it gets very somatic in the body. So whether that's a tightness in the chest, a heaviness on the shoulders, a gripping of the jaw, a need to reach for the phone, it manifests in lots of different ways for different people. But a lot of these sensations we're not fully aware of. So when we start to become aware of them, when we start to name them, we can start to slow down, because it's not just the brain that's like, in that wheel running the show. We're actually tuning into the whole self.
That is great. And so once they've observed the sensations in the body, and they've slowed down, and then what do they then do once they've observed those sensations?
So we start to unpack and link, like what are those, what's driving those sensations, or what are they linked to? Because more often than not, people will go, oh, well, I get that sensation when I know that I have to get up and present in front of, my team, or I have to deliver a difficult conversation, or whatever it is. But the work is when we go deeper, okay, but what's the belief there? So we might have to unpack 10 layers before we get there. But there are what I believe in, there's a lot of research on this. There's like 5-6 fundamental core beliefs that people have that run the show. Things like I'm not enough, or I will end up alone. And even though we can feel very distant from that in the moment, when we start to get back to what that belief is, we can start to navigate and shift that change and understand that sensation better, and sort of facilitate that change within the body.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And it links actually. I was listening to, I can't remember which podcast it was. It was probably Diary of a CEO. And the guest was talking about how if we relabel a sensation or a feeling, so instead of saying I'm anxious about doing a presentation, we reframe it by saying something like my body is getting me prepared and ready for the presentation, or I'm excited about it. And is it that kind of thing, or what do you then do?
I think there's an element where that can be helpful, but for me, sometimes that feels almost like it's still staying on the surface. And one of the most important things that I think is we need to validate the parts of ourselves that feel uncomfortable, because we spend a lot of time pushing away what we have been, taught or see as negative emotions and sensations, like anxiety. I feel anxious that I'm going to have to present. And so we tell ourselves, oh, no, I'm a leader. I shouldn't feel anxious, or I can't feel anxious. We get into that. And actually, if we can validate the part of ourselves that is afraid or is anxious, sometimes giving that part of you space reduces it. So we lean into the anxiety. So I work with my clients whilst keeping them safe. And, we're in an environment that, we've mutually agreed on, and doing practices that they feel safe in. But if we can lean into that anxiety and go there, more often than not, we realize what's building these sensations is the avoidance of them, is the telling ourselves, well, I'm a leader, so I shouldn't feel that, or I've been in this career for 20 years, so why do I still feel this? But it's removing that judgment, that whether that's judgment of self or perceived judgment from others.
Yeah, and that is really powerful, isn't it? The avoidance thing, because how much do we avoid? I talk about it as a behavioral coping strategy. A simple example is if you are afraid of dogs. So the avoidance strategy would be if a dog was walking down the street, you would cross over to the other side of the street. But it's amazing how much in our work we avoid stuff, isn't it? As a coping mechanism.
Yeah.
What kinds of things do you see your clients avoiding?
That's a really good question. This is, I'm supposed to be very brutally honest, and this is why I love this work. They're avoiding parts of themselves. We are all avoiding parts of themselves. And yes, it can manifest as avoidance of certain tasks or conversations or relationships, but it's a mirror to what we are avoiding. And a lot of my work is grounded in shadow work. And so it's those shadow parts of ourselves. And I guess just to talk to what you were saying, but also something I mentioned earlier, is when I come to work with women, a lot of the time they have spent years chastising themselves, feeling like they're failures, feeling like they've done something wrong. And so much of my work is empowering people to accept and not demonize those parts of themselves that they feel are the bad parts or the ugly parts. We've put these labels on them. And actually that's why we do avoid things. So, on the surface, women might come to me. I've had women come to me saying, I can't start this new business venture. I feel completely like crippled by it. Or I had someone recently actually getting married, and she was saying, there's no way I'm doing a speech. I definitely want to, but there's no way I can speak publicly. And so this is the things they're avoiding on the surface. But when we get under it, it's those parts of themselves that they've been rejecting for maybe a really, really long time.
Yeah, fascinating. And for people that are not familiar with shadow work, can you expand on that a bit?
Yeah, of course. So to put it really simply, there are some like founders of shadow work, but shadow work is the idea that we have a shadow part of ourselves. So there might be one or there might be many. And it's this idea, if you think of like your reflection in a shadow on the ground, it's this less visible part of yourself that often is running the show or has sway in what you do. And the reason I talk a lot about the subconscious is because more often than not, because it's almost this like hidden part inadvertently, we're not always aware of it. And sometimes we can become aware of one shadow part of ourselves and then we realize, oh, actually, there's lots of parts. And it's not that it's bad. All of us will have a shadow, just like when we walk in the sun, all of us have a shadow. It's bringing that shadow more into the light that helps us to truly accept our full selves.
So is it a route to being authentic and being yourself? Because often, so the sort of work I do, I press reset on limiting beliefs that were created in childhood as a result of big and little traumas.
Mhm.
But and then often the output at the end is, oh, I can just be myself. I can, they will go inside a client this morning who all of a sudden was saying things to a family member that ordinarily they would have hidden from the family
Mm.
member because they felt uncomfortable exposing that part of them. It made them feel less than. Whereas once that trigger had been suppressed, they caught themselves just talking about it openly with the family member. And it was like, oh, I'm being myself. So from your perspective, what does doing the shadow work result in?
Mm. So I have a framework called Inner Authority Framework, and the final sort of stage is that is I've named empowered self-leadership. So my work I see as an identity shift, and as a result of that identity shift, the women I work with, yes, it goes on to manifest externally. And yes, they go on to like start the business, do the speech at the wedding, get the job, start the relationship, whatever it is, however it comes out externally. But actually, what I'm more interested in and more working with them on is those inner identity shifts.
Can you do a little thing to help me out? And that's to simply hit subscribe or the follow button now, wherever it is that you're listening. So that's maybe on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple, because that will help the podcast get found by other people. And that then enables us to keep going because we continue to keep growing. What would be 5-star amazing though is if you could also leave a review. I really appreciate it. Thanks for your support.
How do I become the type of woman who is willing to take risks, to have the conversation? Because that for me is what is more long lasting and stays with you forever. Like, yes, beautiful that we can support someone to change jobs or feel more confident, but I'm more interested in like how can we change the internal landscape, so that this shift is this realignment, this kind of deep rooted self-trust stays with you throughout life. That's what I see
Nice.
my goal, my calling to support women with.
So, one last thing about shadow work, and then we're going to get into you a little bit more. So, are there any resources or books or things that you can recommend? So, if someone was interested in exploring their shadows, that you can recommend?
There's absolutely bucket loads.
Oh, there.
There's really, really beautiful books. I can send you a list that you can include of like 10 or
Oh,
12
great.
books. Yeah, like
Yeah,
all
yeah.
connected. because it's a combination of shadow, but also like being able to trust the body and go in somatically. Trying to think off the top of my head which one I'd recommend the most. Not one standing out to me as like a first read, because I think it slightly depends on where you're at in your journey. But I absolutely can recommend some resources, and there is so much out there. Even just a quick Google like will bring up some beautiful articles about what it means to do shadow work. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Lovely. We will look forward to that. I think many years ago, my sister she's into shadows and stuff, shadow work. And is it something to do with the archetypes, or is that, I'm sure I've got.
There is, yeah, there is like it's not specifically what I work with, but
Yeah,
there are lots of types of things, and yeah, the archetypes is one, and there
yeah,
definitely is books out there that kind of sort of help you to understand your personality and your tendencies through those core archetypes. Yeah.
yeah. No, that's cool. So now we know about being an embodiment coach and obviously a yoga teacher as well. This
Mm.
is brilliant. What's your, I guess, origin story? How do you end up being an embodiment coach, a yoga teacher? Where does that come from?
Mm. So I guess for me, we'd have to go back to the beginning. I think, for probably all of us, like childhood, our early years are so formative in who we go on to become and the choices we make, particularly in career, relationships, etc. So I had quite a difficult time when I was growing up. I um, went through, a family member having like very serious illness as I grew up, and then I had quite a difficult time at school. So I was bullied as a teenager, and throughout a lot of those experiences, I had this really like long-held belief of I'm not enough. I need to really earn my space at the table. And I spent many, many years, like through my teens, particularly through my 20s. I think we can all relate to having a challenging 20s, trying to earn my enoughness, living by other people's rules. So that showed up for me in relationships, in the fact that I wouldn't take risks. I wasn't able to necessarily hear what I wanted. I was sort of following, I think, a bit of a like society expects this of me, so I will go and do this type of job and do that, and kind of waiting for permission. So leaning in towards those people-pleasing tendencies, which I know so many of us, so many of us have experienced. And so this not enoughness particularly kind of showed up in my career. So I was in a corporate setting for a lot of my career, but I didn't necessarily progress maybe at the rate that I could have. So I would sort of over deliver. I was very driven. I was very, very capable. And outside that looked kind of very successful. But inside I had this, feeling that I was trying to push away of, oh, I think I'm meant to be doing something else. I think this is not quite right. I'm feeling exhausted. I'm actually feeling quite numb and disconnected from myself. But because I really wanted to feel that enoughness that I thought would be delivered by just keeping chugging on, ignoring my body's signals, I just kept pushing myself. And all of this kind of came to a head with quite a severe and big panic attack. So I'd so disconnected from my body, and I'd stopped listening to the signals it was sending me that I was going very close to burnout, that I was on a plane in a middle seat in a middle aisle, which we all know is the worst place to be on a long haul flight. And I had a really severe panic attack, and I'd never experienced anything like that before. I'd definitely experienced feelings of stress and anxiety, but I'd never had such a physical reaction. So my body essentially at that point made it actually impossible for me to ignore. And it felt like a really sink or swim moment for me, because surrounding that panic attack was I was having a very difficult time in my career. I was sort of pushing myself to the brink of burnout. I had a lot going on in my personal life. Had an end of a kind of long-term relationship, a series of bereavements within my family. So this really felt like the pivotal moment for me. And it was actually that moment that then transcended in me shifting everything within my life.
Yeah. Wow, what an amazing story. And I've heard this story before, not your story, but a version of this. I also experienced the same thing. And on a plane, it's interesting, isn't it, how planes can do that to folk and create panic attacks. And it's interesting what you say about ignoring your body, and you know how we push ourselves to that point of near burnout, or we ignore the early warning signs that maybe we are feeling anxious. And you know, when you look at the total picture, not just your picture, but you know, when you are working with your clients, you find out that often there's a number of things in there. So you've got that phrase that you used earlier. I have that in my book, enoughness. You know,
Mm.
what is it that drives us? You know, when is enough enough? You know, at what point do we need to stop proving our worth and accept that we are enough just the way that we're made? So there's that element, there's the work element, then there's the personal relationship element, and then there's, you know, you were dealing with bereavement, and that is, your system was so overloaded, wasn't it, in that moment? And so no
Absolutely.
wonder, you know,
Mm.
and I, one of the analogies I use is that I talk about it being like a pressure cooker. So, you know, if we think about all those things that were layered up in your pressure cooker, the panic attack is the steam that comes out at the top. It's just the body saying, right, enough now. And panic is really, I used to call myself the panic queen. And, you know, and I had almost an identical experience. I had just split up with my boyfriend. I
Mm.
had been invited on an all girls holiday. We were sat in a three, I was in the middle, and all of a sudden I started panicking and I was going white and red, white and red, white and red. And I didn't know whether I was going to throw up or pass out. You know, it was one of those. I managed to get through it, but again, it was our body keeps score, as they say. So,
Absolutely.
so with that in mind, then do you have warning signs, or what are your clues? What are the things that you look out for that mean that you are pushing things too far? And how do you keep that in balance? But also, do you have some kind of daily routine or that enables you to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just to speak to that, at the time, it felt like it came out of nowhere for me because I recognize how numb and disconnected I was, and how, at the time, unwilling I was to admit my vulnerability and lean into the parts of myself that felt not enough, and all those things that were driving the show. But in hindsight, I can name so many different ways that that pressure was building. You know, I wasn't sleeping. I was waking up with racing thoughts. I was just almost the word that's coming to mind is like insatiable, but what I mean is like I couldn't not do something. You know, I was always on the go. Um, I was, drinking heavily, not to a kind of dangerous extent, but kind of in a functional way that now I see probably wasn't healthy for me. I was socializing a lot, wasn't taking any time on my own in nature. So I suppose just to speak to that experience of like that pressure building. So having cultivated that awareness, um, the way that I mean, I live a totally different life now, so it's not set up in that I would necessarily be led to that. But also, I want to recognize that lots of things happen that we don't anticipate. And also, I myself have a huge life event coming up. I'm getting married, so you
Yay.
know, a level of yeah, yay, a level of like stress and pressure that comes with that. a couple of things there. I'm very, very intentional now with my time and with my energy. And I think that that deep connection I've created with myself, which I can speak about in a minute, has allowed me to notice very early on when I feel my energy is dipping, when I feel, because, and also as a woman, we're cyclical, right? So I'll have certain times of the month where I feel more ready to be sociable. I can lean into that energy. I feel more able. Other times where I know if I did the same I did 2 weeks ago, that's going to lead me to feeling overwhelmed or drained. So I think like awareness is really key. The other thing is I have what I call like a menu of practices. Some people might call it a toolbox. I now have this beautiful array of things that I tap into every single day. And I am very resistant to this narrative in the wellness space about like hacks and we have to have this kind of beautiful morning routine, because I think honestly that's a load of bull. I think we should all have this menu of things that we can turn to as and when we need them. So some mornings you're going to have 2 minutes, and 2 minutes is going to be enough to do a very short breath work. But some mornings you're going to have an hour, and I'm going to go and like walk in nature or go to a yoga class, because it's, as a yoga teacher, it's so joyful for me to go and receive as well. And it's important. And I think hopefully for those listening, an important reminder that we can be leaders and we can be in that kind of more masculine energy a lot of the time, but it's so important that we also allow ourselves to receive. And even if we can't do that in the workplace, that we are finding other places in our lives that we can then sink back into more that feminine energy. And when I say masculine and feminine, I mean nothing to do with gender, just those energy centers.
Yeah. And so, what's your definition of receiving? I love that.
It's a really good question. What is my definition of receiving? So I think there are multiple ways that you can receive. You can receive from yourself. So it's like it's stepping into what do I need to give to myself in that moment, purely for me, no agenda, purely to either support myself in that moment, bring joy, relax, whatever it is that you're craving or desiring at that moment, that is receiving. But also receiving from others is so important, because I know, because I've been there, when we are leading, it is so hard to step out of that and allow others to take on the load. So receiving is also feeling safe enough within ourselves to let someone else take some of that load, whether it's like a partner sharing some of the mental load or like the physical, in the home, whatever it is, or if it's at work with like a colleague or a trusted someone. It's not necessarily saying you need to go and do this task for me so I can receive that. It's that energy exchange of like, if I let myself be witnessed, for example, at work, and say I'm struggling with this thing, it's feeling like a burden to me. Even just allowing yourself to be witnessed and someone else to hold that with you is receiving in my eyes, and can make a huge difference.
Yeah. And I love this concept of a menu of practices, because I think you're so right. I mean, it's one of my questions. What does your typical routine look like? And there can be so much pressure, can't there? All right, I've done my meditation, done my journaling, I've done my fell walk, I've had my bubble bath, or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Whereas you're absolutely right, life isn't like that. But as long as we do something for ourselves, yeah. So I really love that suggestion. There was something else I wanted to go back to as well. Yes. So you were talking about, so you've had this panic attack, and this was your kind of moment of realization but we've also got this framework. Is the framework the antidote to what occurred, or how does your framework that you referenced earlier, how does that link to what happened to you?
Yeah, so my inner authority framework is in place to avoid us even getting anywhere near that point. Now, often women come and work with me. There's a realization that they want support after a big moment. So, you know, it can be the intention is this supports us to not even get there. But I do recognize that so many people come for support after a kind of a really big moment happens in their life that feels okay, I can't kind of stay with this. But yeah, the framework is in, if it's okay, I'll share just the three
Yeah,
things.
go for it.
I've
Yeah.
probably inadvertently just described it because it's a lot, it's a kind of marriage of there's science in it, there's the kind of coaching theory, but also so much of it speaks to my own experience. So the framework is in these three phases. So there's this phase one of like slow down and create safety, because I recognize, and so many others recognize, that we can't change from a place of threat. So what I mean is, we spoke slightly on this earlier, if the nervous system is activated, if we are constantly in response, if we are constantly in fight, flight, fawn, we're never going to be able to make lasting change. We need to deactivate. And when I talk about regulation, I just want to make a side point here that there's a misconception that to regulate our nervous system, we need to sit in lotus pose and meditate under a tree. And that's just such a misconception. Yes, beautiful, we can meditate and that is lovely, and sometimes that helps. But a lot of regulation is finding joy again. It's like connecting in with that inner child. It is letting rage leave the body, like screaming into a pillow. Like there's so many different ways that we can regulate. And so I just wanted to mention that because I think there's a little misconception there about that.
That's great.
That's sort of phase one of like creating that safety, slowing everything down, getting ourselves into our nervous system into a space where we actually can receive shifts, we can actually make lasting change. The second is to rebuild that body trust. So from those years, maybe a lifetime of, like I had, of essentially abandoning myself for that need to want to feel enough, I abandoned myself for, 25 plus years. And so we learn to read our own signals and stop overriding. And I spoke a bit about how we read our signals, but also it's that stop overriding. And you used a beautiful example of like a client who then was like, okay, I need to say something to this family member that I wouldn't have before. And maybe before they would have overridden that and just gone off and kept that to themselves. And in a way that is an abandonment of self, because they're abandoning their need there in that moment. So phase two is all about that. And then phase three of the in authority framework is this empowered self-leadership. So stepping into real authority. And when I talk about authority, it's not like I'm just going to step in and become CEO of a company. It's like becoming CEO of yourself. It's all about that inner shift. So from there, like women I work with tend to find that they are making decisions that hold and saying those like full embodied yeses and nos. And they're coming from a place of confidence that doesn't feel like performance anymore, or confidence that doesn't need external validation. Like, we welcome feedback from others. It's always lovely to receive beautiful feedback, but actually that self-trust and confidence comes from within. So that's my framework that I work within. And that if we're getting there before someone feels like they're at that breaking point, actually this is going to help them to just distance that gap and move, down a different path.
Oh, that's great. Are you going to write a book about it?
I'd absolutely love to. It's funny. I took this morning. I went for a nice walk. The weather's quite nice at the moment, so that's been what I've been enjoying. And I feel really called. I feel really called to write a book. But yeah, it's just a matter of time, I think.
Because I love all your language. It sounds to me like a really logical process and something that, needs to be out there and people doing, obviously they can come to you for that service. Can I just get you to expand on? So first of all, what it means to be the CEO of yourself, and then second, what it means to make a full embodied yes or no. What is that like?
Yeah, gorgeous. So CEO of self, I see that as being a woman who feels fully aware of her decision making. So it's not coming from the shadow or coming from societal beliefs, conditioning, things like that. It's someone who is making decisions and moves in her life that feel her own. And just to say, that's not to say we can't have support or welcome other people's input. You know, it's there, but it's ultimately that piece around there's no self-abandonment in the choices she's making in life. And we can stay, you know, we can stay with ourselves while still serving others, because I recognize that many people listening will have families or dependents or caring responsibilities or big teams. You know, it's recognizing our duty to them while still completely staying true to ourselves.
Yeah.
And that takes time, and that takes
Yeah.
really, really knowing yourself to get there.
And self-awareness as well, to go from that, you know, if the stats are true and we are at best 5% conscious choice and at worst 1% conscious choice, and the rest of it is just being driven subconsciously or unconsciously, then we've really got to be aware, haven't we? As rather than just making those quick decisions, you
Yeah.
know. Yeah. Oh, that is really fantastic.
And
So
it's always, oh, I was just going to say, and it's always coming back to self and coming back to body. So even in those like quick moments, you need to make a decision, right? I'm just thinking of many examples when I was in the corporate world where I'd be kind of on the spot and I'd need to make a very quick decision that could affect my team. It's that split moment, that awareness to go, to pause, take a breath, listen to the body before just reacting, because like you said, so much of it is like, this is just always the way I've reacted. Um, and then sometimes in hindsight, we're like, actually, I don't think that that's what I want to do, or that's how I want this situation to be. So it's giving yourself permission as well to pause, because so many times we don't, and asking why don't we? You know, well, we could
yeah,
go there, but yeah.
yeah,
And then you asked about that full body yes and no, and again, it's that often, and I see this a lot in the women I work with, we say yes because we feel we have to, or we feel we need to, in order to earn our right to be in certain spaces and to be where we are. And that full-bodied yes and no is about, when we're saying yes or no, we feel it's fully aligned, and we're not, often when we're saying yes in the head, in when we're above the shoulders in the head, it's because it's conditioning, and it's because we think it's expected of us. So a full-bodied yes is like, it's deeply connected, that feels aligned, that yes feels like it should be there. And same with the no, often we struggle to say no, so it's finding that full.
And what might you experience for that fully aligned yes or no? Is it a sensation? Or so, for example, I used idiomotor signals or unconscious signals for people to tap into what they really think or feel at a deeper level. What if I'm making an embodied yes or an embodied no, what would I experience in my body to know? Because I am very much in my head and not and not in my body. So what?
Yeah, I can speak to how it feels to me, because there's loads of different techniques you can use, and like, this is the joy of one-to-one work. I'm sure you experience this with the people you work with, is like, we can find what meets that person. So for me, an unembodied yes or no would be like a very quick, someone asks something from me and I might notice, oh, a bit of like, oh, I feel a bit uncomfortable and I'm typing fast and my shoulders are up by my ears, and I'm going to say, yep, I can do that. An embodied yes would be, I've taken the time, I've paused, I've just, even if it's like, for me now, it's a split second, but sometimes at the beginning, you need longer, you might need a few minutes to just close down the eyes, check in with the body. And it might be like, okay, I'm noticing a sensation here. I feel uncomfortable. Okay, what's that? What is that? You know, we name it. Okay, so my heart's racing and my shoulders have just risen. Right, what is that? Oh, I don't really want to do it. Okay, we get under that. What's underneath that? Do I not want to do it just because I feel it's inconveniencing me, or is it because actually there's a belief there? So it's kind of getting through that cycle that now, you know, once it's practiced is a split second. But at the beginning, we ask a few questions just to understand it. Okay, well, actually there's a belief that I need to say yes to this person, because if I don't, then I'm not worthy. And if I'm not worthy, I could end up alone. And suddenly someone asking you to do a task is actually linked to like a deep rooted belief that I might end up alone. And so once you can name that, and the body's helped you connect with that, I can go, well, actually, okay, I know I'm not alone. And I often put a hand on my heart and just kind of talk to myself, like to my inner child, to that part of myself that feels very vulnerable, and say, okay, well, I know actually I'm not alone. And actually saying yes to this thing I don't need to say yes to this. It's not going to serve me, and this person doesn't need me to do this. You know, we have to weigh out the things, and I can go back and I can say, actually, no, I'm not. I can't do that today. And I think for me, it would come through as like a feeling of a sense of calm. But just to know, sometimes when we're moving towards this, if we've never done this type of embodied yes and embodied no before, there can be some uncomfortability. It can feel a little uncomfortable, because if we're not used to saying no to people and we're suddenly empowering ourselves to say no, oh, that's new. And also, just to say, we can't manage other people's expectations. So if there's someone who's always said yes in life, and suddenly we're starting to give other people no's, it's just to say it's not our job to manage their reaction either. So yeah, we can sometimes get different reactions from other people when we move towards that.
That's such great advice. And what I'm taking away from it is just, slowing the whole process down. I can think of so many situations where this would be, so useful. So our last guest, Asterios Drossos, fantastic Greek guy. He works for Sani and Icos Resorts. He's the food and beverage director over there. And he said he wanted to ask the next guest this question because he would also like the answer to this question. So his question to you is, what you would change to make your life happier and your relationships with colleagues and family better on a daily basis?
Wow, what a question. I'm going to challenge it. I don't think that happiness is something that we need to chase, because it's taking us into the future, right? It's taking us out of the present moment. I think to experience that full body joy and happiness, it's that piece I've been talking about. It's never abandoning ourselves. It's always coming back to self, and not in a selfish way, not in a I'm more important than anyone else, but ultimately, like, you are with yourself through your whole life. And so we've got to love for that self. So I think the joy and the happiness is not something in the future that we need to strive for. It's something that we need to sit with every day and not just ask ourselves the question, how can I keep returning to myself? Because when we return to ourselves, we hold up a mirror for everybody else. And we we lead the way for them. And when we return to ourselves and fill up that cup, there's that really famous saying, we can give more to others. The more we build our capacity for joy and for love and for showing up for ourselves, the more we can build that for our friends and our family and our colleagues around us.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So, Asterios, if you're listening, fill up your cup and sit with yourself. Come back to yourself. Yeah, no, that's great. So what question would you like to leave the next guest?
Okay, I think it just goes on theme with what I've brought today, because I think leaders have such an incredible amount of self-awareness, but rarely that is physical. So I would be asking them, what is your body telling you that you currently aren't hearing?
Ooh, I like it. Yes, great question. And then to bring everything to a conclusion, what 3 actionable tips would you like to leave the leaders that are listening?
So the first one, probably the biggest one, is this idea of shoulders up or shoulders down. So like checking in regularly. So whenever you're in a moment, whether it's like a decision-making moment or a moment of stress, I would be asking myself, am I in my head? That's possibly the wiring, the conditioning talking. Or am I in my body? That's the wisdom, that's like the true part of yourself. So just, I really love the saying I use of just shoulders up or shoulders down, just checking in what's running the show.
Ooh, nice.
Um, a really joyful one is to reconnect with, I call it inner child, but it can be joy. You could use the word joy, like it is essential. So be silly, be playful, be vulnerable. Like this is what makes us human. And I totally hear and understand that we can't do that in every situation. And, you know, there are societal expectations of us in the workplace, but you can bring yourself into those spaces. And that is what makes you more relatable, more human, more vulnerable. And I don't think any leader would ever regret just connecting in with that part of themselves, because for so many of us, it's been a long time since we have. And then just a simple piece of advice that I think sometimes can get missed is we need to stop waiting till we feel ready. So if anyone's listening, to know that like readiness is built, it's not something that's received. And a lot of the body can show us that. And a lot of the times we can think, oh, well, I feel a bit panicked about something, so I'm not ready. But actually, like, that's just a sign that readiness is ready to be built. And so,
Fancy a chat? Or maybe you're interested in the Optimized Leader Program Next Level. You can book a free 15-minute call. See the link on screen or in my show notes.
often the next step is the step that we're delaying. So just leaning into that trust, just building that self-trust within yourself.
Well, you are a model of excellence.
Thank you.
You embody all of that. I have really enjoyed interviewing you. You're so calming. You speak so much wisdom. I'm sure you're an old soul. You've been here before.
I
Um,
think so.
yeah, you're really, really wise. And yeah, I have learned so much from you. It's been really fascinating. Thank you so much for being so generous, being so logical with everything that you've explained and explaining things really well. It's been a real delight to have you on the show. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. Before we sign off, I'd like to invite you to my quick reflective practice called Pause, Reflect, Act. As your leadership coach, I'm here to help you translate today's insights into personal growth and your next steps. Answer the prompts that follow in your journal or notes. Alternatively, you can access my complimentary journal and self-coaching tool in the show notes or head over to estelleread.com. So in this week's episode, Maddie Brenner-Roach gets us to reflect on a number of things, and here are some questions that can help you take that learning forward. So number 1, the avoidance mirror. What task, conversation, or decision have you been putting off lately? If that avoidance is a mirror reflecting something deeper, what part of yourself might you actually be avoiding? Number 2, Shoulders up or shoulders down? Think of a recent decision you made quickly from a place of pressure or habit. If you'd paused and checked in with your body first, is this a head response or a body response? And what might you have chosen differently? Number 3, readiness as something built, not given. What's the one next step in your life or work that you keep delaying because you don't feel ready? What would it mean to trust that readiness is built by taking that step, not before it? If you'd like to be notified when the next episode drops, remember to subscribe. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with someone who might benefit. Finally, if any of these topics have sparked your interest and you'd like to work with me, you can apply for a free discovery call at estelleread.com. Let's see if we're a good fit. You'll also find plenty of free resources there. I'm Estelle Read, executive coach, speaker, and best-selling author, and this has been the Optimising Leader Brilliance podcast. Thanks for listening. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered professional advice. Please consult with a qualified professional for any specific advice related to your situation.